Cristina, let's start with you. What is your role at Kraft Heinz?
I'm the Chief Growth Officer and the Chief Sustainability Officer for the international zone. As a Chief Growth Officer, I manage everything that relates to the consumer, from brands to capabilities to innovation, R&D. And as a CSO, what I'm doing is I'm linking the sustainability agenda with our brands and our actions, making the whole thing a little bit more connected and ensuring that what we promise we do and what we do we're able to tell. So this is the circle.
Yeah, no mean feat, I'm sure. And David, what about you?
So I'm the ESG director for the International Zone and Global Net Zero Lead.
Okay, and what does that translate to? I feel like that probably touches on a whole range of things.
It does. It's the reason I love my role. It's the breadth of covering all of the various ESG topics that come up across all of the geographies outside of North America. Then also the focus and the data on driving impact through net zero.
Okay, and so I'm going to come to that data point a bit later. But firstly, we'd just love to know, what are the key challenges that you're facing with your sustainability at Kraft Heinz, and what's kind of sticking you in terms of getting there?
You could say?
Yeah, well, I think there is a huge challenge in terms of data visibility. So there's many various different topics, whether it's human rights, water, footprints, growth aspects in terms of regenerative agriculture, rely hugely on data and visibility for this value chain. And right now that's a massive challenge because the data we've had historically hasn't been organised in that way for us to be able to use it for those purposes. So that's the real big focus. Once we start to get some of that visibility, it starts to drive greater impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the challenge is exactly that. We have to establish our basis. In fact, our first real report happened 3 years ago. So we've been climbing up from that, really understanding what we are by each and every one of the businesses. We have a very broad organization. We're in many local markets, and of course, to fully understand the numbers, what we want to do, we need to always understand the local realities, and then bring them all the way up.
Yeah, and get down to that granular level. So how is altruistic helping you overcome this challenge?
I think it's exactly that. I think you guys have been amazing at giving us the basis. The other thing that I really enjoyed was the way you helped us unpacking each and every one of the areas, and sometimes by just reformulating the problem or reformulating the opportunity in a way that it can be put into chunks. That is already a great help. And then, of course, the data that Vicky was mentioning, as well as how do we create the path.
Yeah. And so coming to this data point, I guess it's what we've been working together to do, get that granular level data. What has that actually meant for you guys?
So I think the sort of greenhouse gas protocol and how people report their carbon footprint is actually not particularly helpful in understanding what are the problems that need to be solved. And we've been working together now, building up that understanding of our dashboard, being able to create transparency to extract some of those insights so we can really focus on what are the areas that have the material impact on our footprint can be addressed.
Yeah. And do you want to dive into some of those key material areas that are there that you're pinpointing and be okay, this is where we're focusing on and this is what we're going to lead the charge on?
I think it depends by scope area, but if I give you a couple of examples, if you're into our manufacturing footprint, we're working quite hard to produce what we call the 000.
Okay.
And that is a big starting point. Another area that it will also relate to entire chain is all the work we're doing in agriculture, being in the food systems COP today. I think those two areas I will highlight. Would that anything?
Yeah, I would complement that with, obviously, you can't talk agriculture and emissions without talking in livestock. And for us this week, we announced founding membership of the Dairy Methane Action Alliance. And that is creating transparency around our methane emissions on an annual basis with an active focus on how we look to reduce it. There are many different ways that we can reduce the methane emissions associated with livestock. Some of it's better manure management, some of it's better control of feed, but of course, obviously, looking at other dietary solutions for consumers and driving growth of those alternative proteins is another core part of it as well.
And Cristina, the 000 factories, would you mind unpacking that a little bit more? in terms of what that initiative involves?
Yeah, it's actually a global wide initiative. I think we started like 2 years ago, something like that.
That's right, yeah.
And basically, what it does is zero water waste, and renewable energy. Anything else we have there?
No, that's great. Zero water, zero waste, zero emissions.
Wow. And so how many of those, are those initiatives that you're pushing with your suppliers? And are there any suppliers that have taken these on and are championing it?
We've got our first 2 factories qualified as triple zero,
Really?
which is amazing progress. We've started to classify many more sites. I think there are over a dozen sites that we now have as zero waste as well. Of course, the decarbonisation is heavily reliant on fuel use, so how we look to electrify processes and then extend that electricity use to obviously renewable energy. So as of next year, 90% of our energy use or electricity use within Europe is going to be from a wind farm in Spain.
Yeah,
Wow.
which makes me doubly proud, by the way.
Yeah,
Because I'm
as
from
you
there,
should
I'm
be.
Spanish, so I'm Spanish and I love the tests that we're doing there.
That's brilliant. And are there any other key success points that you want to flag that you're like, I'm proud about what Kraft Heinz has done here?
I think that I'm very proud of the commitments we're doing in terms of agriculture.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the sustainable tomatoes that we have signed for 2025, I think is an important one because we are a gigantic tomato manufacturer. We're the biggest manufacturer of seeds globally. We have a big franchise with ketchup, as you guys might know. We actually sell 650 million bottles of ketchup a year. So our impact in this area is big. And I think here we need to become thought leaders. How we can grab one key ingredient after another one, grab one key ingredient and show how can we get to better practices. That's one that I'm particularly proud of.
If I could add one as well, I think we were founding partners of Global Beans is How Coalition.
Yep.
So this is a coalition that's gathering huge amounts of momentum, focused on doubling consumption of beans, legumes, pulses over the next 5 years. And beans is such a wonderful crop. I think a lot of our diet, a lot of our history is based on what's been easy to do, what's been cheap, what's been able for us to distribute. Beans is great for human health, and it's great for planetary health as well.
Yeah, beans and tomatoes are super plants.
Yeah.
Like, treated the right way, with the right agricultural practices, you can actually not only feed right the people, you can actually feed the soil the right way.
I love how you've chosen, some key hero ingredients that you're like, okay, these are like a main contributor. This is where we can lead the pack and we can actually show best practice and then let that trickle down to like other places in the industry.
The other thing to say on that is we are being quite open source, like all the learnings that we are having on our farming practices. We have a manual that is open for anyone to be able to access it. And that to me is very important because, having spent a couple of days here, this is a heavy topic that we need to tackle as a community. So the more we learn, the more we share, the more we're able to implement what our neighbor is doing, the better we're going to be in the future.
I love that. And how do you make this into a commercially viable practice? Like there are a lot of different sustainability initiatives and it's always against other competing priorities. Like do we go down, I don't know, product value or like what can you use to make the business case for not just doing these projects as a pilot project, but keeping them going into the long term?
I think this is where my role as a CGO and a CSO becomes quite, I think, very important for companies to be able to bring the commercial side together with the sustainable side. Because at the end of the day, it is true, like one of the panels now that was saying that consumers are not prepared to pay, but we need to be prepared to bring value into our products. We need to be prepared to isolate climate issues, for example, into a supply chain. We need to be prepared to tell a story. Now, that story has to be backed up with the story doing. No? It cannot be only storytelling. And when you get the both of them together, you actually get two actions that are very interesting. I can give you two examples where I think we did quite well. Like for example, we at some point we decided to grow tomatoes in Mars soil conditions. What we did is we replicated the depleted soils of Mars in the Aldrin Institute in Florida. Now we didn't do that to plant tomatoes in Mars. We did that to learn how do we work with depleted soils. We tried and failed 9 times. Once we're able to do that, the agrophysicists that we had in the Aldrin Institute, as well as our own agro team, they were able to understand much more. So there were learnings. And there were some tomatoes. We failed 9 times, and finally we got enough tomatoes to do 1 bottle of ketchup and send it up to space. So it was a fun activity. It got us connected to the consumer. We also played with Fortnite at recreating farm. So the both of them together got us to almost 3 billion consumers. And you're gonna say, well, that's not gonna solve anything in the real world. Well, you might be right. But getting the consumer understanding the importance of the food systems and the importance of soil health also goes a long way. The more we understand the problems that we are facing, the better we're going to be in the future. So this is where I think having great story doing and linking it to storytelling through brands, it makes an important agenda.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Having that narrative to speak not just to consumers, but also speak to the board and something that's memorable that you can take with you. And people will be like, oh, Kraft Heinz, did you hear they sent a bottle of ketchup up to space? Like, crazy.
But to be honest with you, what we wanted people was to really understand farming practices, like what we are doing. We want to talk about soil health. The issue is that it's hard to get consumers coming into a site. We talk about our farmers. You know, we have beautiful stories, like, for example, the Basket family, again in Spain, which is some of the farmers that we are partnering at getting to better agricultural practices. And it's been quite amazing. Like now, for example, in Spain, we have 100% covered cropping in all our farms. And that was created one farmer at a time, so to speak. Now, for us, this is an amazing, incredibly exciting story. But often, you know, you cannot get the consumers, you cannot get people coming to our sites and coming to understand our speeches. So this is where I think when you create a beautiful story and you can get the consumers coming over to understand it, it becomes a much more algorithmic action for us.
And the role that data plays in that means that they can be credible as well. Like what you're putting out, you can have faith that actually this is a bit more watertight than what I was previously playing with, which is also amazing. And Dave, what about like how do you speak internally about getting people on board around the sustainability initiatives? Because I guess it touches on so many different areas of the company, from R&D to operations to finance team. Yeah. Do you have any advice for other sustainability professionals for like putting on all those numerous caps?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think regardless of what role you do in an organization, you're increasingly expected to take a leadership space within the ESG. The challenge, whether you're in HR around diversity inclusion, all the way through to procurement or even finance looking at risk, they're all connected to ESG. So when I came into the role, there was a lot of our leadership team was saying, okay, let's prioritize on the activities we're going to do. And actually, it's very hard to do that and still keep people's engagement. So we tried to promote 3 green behaviors. So that's green from go. If you're going to do something for the first time, get it right first time. The second one is forward, never back. So there are some areas where we can agree a new wind farm in Spain and you make huge progress overnight. Alternatively, allowing for construction of things. Alternatively, there are other areas where it's small incremental improvements day by day. So as long as you're going in the right direction, you'll drive progress. And then the final one is walk the talk. So it's easy to make these big global commitments, but actually there's thousands of decisions that are made on a daily basis by individuals, by small teams that never get that visibility. We just want to make sure that everybody's trying their best to be as consistent as the intent of those global commitments as possible.
I will complement a little bit the question by find people who are passionate about the space. Like, for example, I remember the first time I met you, DK, it was still in the COVID times where we didn't even see each other in person. And I think you were leading some kind of ESG day in Nothing Right. And I saw DK talking about, you know, what it means to be sustainable, what it means to have ESG in all the different areas. And I saw his passion. So for me, when you joined the team and he became part of growth, it was important because when you find passionate people who really understand the space, people who are really going to be dedicated to it, that to me is also a shortcut. You need to find people with this level of passion to be able to drive a difference.
It's infectious.
I think so.
And my last question is just around bringing it back to suppliers, because you've been doing amazing things engaging your suppliers. I know there are a lot of issues with getting suppliers engaged around, we hear about survey hell, that everybody's sending them surveys that they're having to fill out with. And then as a brand, you get a low response rate and you're also worried about bogging them down with too much. I'd love to just hear what Kraft Heinz is doing to engage your suppliers.
I think you have two things, because at the end of the day, this is a complex issue and you have the different scopes. So I'm going to start with the strategy and then maybe you help me with the part. When it comes to thinking, I think it's important to have people such as yourself who help us with the data, help us with unpacking the issues. Then to me, another amazing partner we have is Revolt. Mm-hmm. Revolt is actually helping us with translating that into speech, translating that into, okay, how does that translate to a purpose that teams can rally, that other departments can rally against? That's the next level. But if you like, this stays at a little bit at the top, no? At the strategy side. Then you need the action. Like, for example.
So I think this is a really key point, which is we've done a number of tenders looking for outside partners, and the one thing that we really look for is somebody who's intent on making an impact. So whether that's obviously the work we do with Altruistic and the process that we went through there, whether it was our consultancy helping us to support us on our net zero transition plan, or even the partners and suppliers that we work with. We have 1,700 food suppliers. We need to focus on the partners who are genuinely wanting to make impact. So I think that's the big thing. Rather than name checking, I think it's more of that behavioural approach. We want to see people who really drive it.
Love that. And then finally, is there one big piece of advice that you would give to other brands, other kind of head of sustainabilities out there trying to make their impact?
I think I will give one a little bit at high level, which is, I think the higher you pay in ESG, the better. I think having ESG closer to commercial functions is very important, and every company has put ESG where they could or where they came up with. Even this morning we're discussing the docking of the ESG responsibles is so varied in the industry. I don't think the industry has solved yet where to lock this professional. And I think that's important because the closer you put it to commercial, the higher you put in the organization, the more holistic is going to be the approach, the better the results. That's one thing I would say.
So I think for me it's about going deep with insight. So whether that be data, whether that be on-farm practices, there's a Japanese phrase, gembuchi, which is go to see the problem, and I think being able to really get to the nub of the issue is absolutely key. We've had debates on should we buy from this supplier or that supplier, and actually if you start checking the data, they're all buying it from the same end of the value chain. So trying to drive insights to really understand detail, I think is key.
I love that. And I think your team setup reflects that as well, with Steph Koulis, head of data transformation, right at the core of the team, pushing that agenda. So that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much both. This has been an amazing time to speak to you, and hopefully see you around COP more.
Thank you.
Here.
Thank you.